The house stood on the hill like a warning. From the outside, it looked like wealth shaped into stone and glass, all sharp lines and guarded angles, surrounded by high walls and silent cameras that never blinked. Inside, it felt colder than the marble it was built from, not because of temperature, but because of what lived there: order, control, power that did not need to announce itself. The Mafia boss moved through the mansion without hurry. He never rushed. Men who rushed made mistakes, and mistakes cost blood. He was dressed simply, dark clothes, nothing that drew attention, yet everyone felt his presence before they saw him. It was not fear born from shouting or violence in the open. It was fear learned over time, fear that understood silence could be more dangerous than rage. No one spoke when he entered a room. Conversations did not stop abruptly, they simply never started. Staff sensed him the way animals sense a storm before the sky changes, a subtle shift in the air, a tightening in the chest. They lowered their eyes and kept their hands busy, polished surfaces until they reflected nothing human back, straightened chairs that were already straight. Every movement was careful, precise, rehearsed. Rules existed in this house, but none were written. They lived in glances, in pauses, in the way no one ever sat unless told to. You did not ask questions, you did not linger, you did not touch what was not offered, and above all, you did not reveal need. Need was weakness, weakness was dangerous. The dining room was long and immaculate, a table carved from dark wood that could seat more people than ever gathered there. Plates arrived filled with food prepared by the best chefs money and loyalty could buy, meats cooked perfectly, bread still warm, fruits arranged like artwork, yet no one ate with pleasure. The food was abundant, but it carried no joy. It was consumed because it was there, because waste was tolerated, but indulgence was not. Meals ended in silence, chairs pushed back softly, plates cleared without comment. The boss rarely sat for long. He would take a few bites, drink his coffee, and leave. Eating was a function, like breathing or planning. He had trained himself long ago not to need comfort from things that could be taken away. Hunger had once ruled him, now he ruled it back. He believed kindness made men careless. He had seen it happen. A soft word turned into hesitation. Hesitation turned into mercy. Mercy turned into a grave. In his world, compassion was a luxury people could not afford, so he kept his face neutral, his voice calm, his decisions final. He paid his staff well, protected them from outside harm, and expected absolute loyalty in return. That was fairness. Anything more was indulgence. The mansion reflected him perfectly. Spotless halls, controlled lighting, no photos on the walls, no signs of family, no warmth. Even the silence felt managed, as if it had been trained to stay in its place. The house did not echo. It absorbed sound the way the boss absorbed emotion, without leaving a trace. Yet beneath all that control, something fragile existed, though no one acknowledged it. Fragility hid well in places like this. It crouched in corners. It learned to breathe quietly. It learned to make itself small enough to survive. The boss did not see that yet. He moved through his house believing it functioned exactly as designed. A system that worked, a machine that obeyed. He did not know that silence can hold secrets heavier than noise, or that hunger does not disappear simply because food is present. He did not know that somewhere within these walls, fear and need had learned to coexist with luxury. If kindness was weakness, then survival demanded hardness. That was the law of this house. And under that law, something delicate had already begun to crack, unseen, unheard, waiting for the moment it could no longer stay hidden. Because in a place where silence is feared, the smallest sound can change everything. The morning arrived without ceremony. Light slid through the tall windows of the mansion, slowly touching stone walls, polished floors, and the long, empty dining table. The house woke the same way it always did, in silence, disciplined, and watchful as if it never truly slept. The Mafia boss ended a call in his private study, his voice calm, low, controlled. Men on the other end had agreed without argument. They always did. Not because he threatened them, but because they knew what silence after his words meant. He walked through the corridor alone, footsteps steady, unhurried. The house seemed to hold its breath around him. Guards nodded once staff lowered their eyes. No greetings were exchanged. They were not needed. As he approached the kitchen, a sound reached him that did not belong. Soft, barely there. A faint scrape followed by a pause. Then another. He stopped. The house was not supposed to make sounds like that. Not when he was awake. Not when everything was under control. He stood still, listening. The sound came again, slower this time, cautious. Metal against ceramic. Then nothing. His instinct sharpened. Not with anger, but with focus. In his world, small sounds often meant danger. A mistake. A breach. Someone forgetting their place. He moved toward the kitchen without calling out. Without alerting anyone. His presence alone was usually enough. The kitchen was spotless as always. Steel counters clean to the point of reflection. Pots aligned perfectly. Nothing out of order. Nothing wrong. Yet the sound returned. Quieter now. Closer to the floor. He took another step, then another. Rounding the long dining table that separated the open kitchen from the rest of the room. And then he saw her. She was crouched low near the wall, half hidden by the table leg. Her body folded inward as if trying to disappear. A small plate balanced on her knees. Food piled unevenly on it, leftovers cold and mismatched. The kind that never reached the table. Her hands trembled as she lifted a fork. She ate quickly in small bites, chewing without lifting her eyes, as if she expected someone to shout at any second. She did not see him. The Mafia boss stopped breathing. In that moment, the fortress cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, but deep where control usually lived. Food was everywhere in this house. More than anyone could eat. More than entire neighborhoods outside these walls. Yet here was someone hiding to eat. As if survival itself was forbidden. She flinched suddenly, freezing mid-bite. As if she sensed something shift in the air. Fear ran through her posture before thought did. But she still did not look up. He could have spoken. One word would have made her drop the plate. One sound would have reminded her who ruled this space. But he said nothing. He stood there watching her swallow, quickly wiping her mouth with her sleeve. Not from rudeness, but from urgency. This was not theft. This was hunger trained to stay quiet. Something inside him tightened. A memory he had buried long ago stirred. The kind that smelled like cold food and long nights. The kind that came before power. He stepped back slowly, silently, retreating the way he would from a room holding explosives. She never knew he was there. As he walked away, the sound of the fork returned. Soft, desperate, careful. The house settled again into silence. But it was no longer clean. Because once you see hunger hiding in a place like this, you can never unsee it. And the most dangerous thing was not that she had broken a rule. It was that the rule had been broken without him ever knowing. In a world built on control, that kind of ignorance was weakness. And something fragile had just revealed itself. Quietly, in the most powerful house she had ever known. He did not sleep that night. The house remained still, but his mind did not. The image stayed with him the way a shadow follows light. Small hands shaking, eyes lowered, a body folded into itself as if existence required permission. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the controlled silence he had built. The same silence that once felt like safety, now felt like accusation. He told himself it was none of his concern. That rules existed for a reason. That order kept people alive. That softness ruined men like him. But the truth pressed harder. If the house was perfect, why did hunger need to hide? Morning came slow and pale. He rose before the staff as he often did. Not out of habit this time, but out of restlessness. He walked the corridors again. The same marble, the same quiet. Yet something felt wrong. As if the walls knew what he knew now. From a distance he saw her, the maid, moving through the kitchen with careful steps. Cleaning counters already clean. Aligning plates already aligned. She moved like someone walking on glass. Every gesture small. Every breath measured. He stopped where she could not see him. Her face looked different in daylight. Tired, drawn, eyes hollow in a way sleep could not fix. She wiped a counter twice. Then a third time. As if perfection might protect her. When a spoon slipped from her hand and struck the floor. The sound was sharp. Too sharp. She froze. Her shoulders tightened. Her breath caught. She waited. Not for forgiveness, but for consequence. The Mafia boss felt something break inside him. That reaction was not normal. Not for a simple mistake. Not for a house that claimed fairness. Fear like that came from repetition. From punishment learned over time. She bent slowly to pick up the spoon. Hands still shaking. Eyes never lifting. He turned away before she noticed him. Later he summoned the head of the household. Not with anger. Not with accusation. He asked simple questions. How long has she worked here? Does she take meals with the others? Is there any complaint about her performance? The answers came carefully. 8 months. Always on time. Never asks for anything. Always refuses more food. Refuses. That word stayed with him. No one should have to refuse food. He dismissed the man and stood alone again. Memories surfaced uninvited. A younger version of himself. Eating cold scraps in stairwells. Learning to swallow hunger along with pride. He had sworn never to forget that feeling. Yet power had buried it. That afternoon he watched from afar. As meals were prepared. Plates filled. Food carried past her. never offered, never claimed. She took nothing, not because she did not need it, but because she had learned not to need. That was the real crime. Not stealing, not hiding, but surviving so quietly that no one noticed. As night fell, he made a decision. Not fueled by pity, not driven by guilt, but by control. If fear had been written into the walls, then the law itself had to change. Because something fragile was living under his roof. And if he did nothing, the silence he ruled would eventually destroy it. And that he could not allow. The decision followed him like a second shadow. It did not arrive loud or dramatic. It settled quietly in his chest. Heavy, unavoidable. For the first time in years, the Mafia boss questioned the structure he trusted more than people. The rules had always been clear. Distance kept control. Control kept order. Order kept everyone alive. Yet something had slipped through. Not violence, not betrayal, but hunger. That disturbed him more than any threat. He spent the day watching without being seen. From the upper hall, from the edge of doorways, from behind glass that reflected nothing back. The maid moved through the house as if trying not to exist. Her footsteps barely touched the floor. Her eyes stayed down. Her hands worked constantly, as if stopping meant danger. She cleaned rooms that were already clean, folded towels that would never be used, prepared spaces meant for men who spoke in whispers and carried weapons under their coats. No one spoke to her unless necessary. Not out of cruelty, but habit. Silence had trained everyone. In the afternoon, the staff meal was prepared. A separate table. A separate room. Food good enough, but not plentiful. She stood at the doorway, waited, watched others take plates. When her turn came, she took the smallest portion. A piece of bread, a spoon of rice, nothing more. Then she stepped back, as if ashamed for even that. The Mafia boss felt something twist inside him. This was not discipline. This was erasure. Later he retreated to his private room, the only place where even guards kept distance. He poured a drink, did not touch it. Memories came without permission. A younger version of himself, sleeping in abandoned buildings, learning which dumpsters were checked and which were not, learning to eat fast, quiet, hidden. He remembered the rule he learned first. Never let anyone see you need something. That rule had built him, and now it was destroying someone else. As evening approached, he called for reports. Business numbers, territory updates, security movements. Everything was perfect. And that made it worse. Because perfection had hidden a truth he should have seen. When night fell, he walked through the dining room alone. The long table empty. Chairs untouched. Food prepared for the next day. So much abundance. So little dignity. He imagined her there again, crouched, eating cold scraps, afraid to be discovered. That image burned deeper than blood ever had. In his world, power was law. And law could be changed. Not publicly, not emotionally, but precisely. He did not need to speak to her. Not yet. He needed to rewrite the rules, so no one would ever have to hide again. The next morning would not begin with punishment. It would begin with command. Because kindness spoken softly might be ignored, but dignity enforced through authority, that would last. And somewhere beneath all the marble and steel, something fragile waited, unaware that the silence ruling its life was about to break. The answers did not come from confrontation. They came from listening. The Mafia boss learned long ago that truth avoided loud rooms. It hid inside conversations, in pauses, in what people assumed did not matter. That morning he did not summon the maid. He did not look at her. He let her pass like any other shadow in the house. Instead, he called for the woman who had managed the household longer than anyone else. A woman who survived 3 regimes and never asked questions. Someone who understood how to speak without saying too much. He asked about schedules, about food orders, about staff turnover. Then casually, as if it meant nothing, he asked about the maid. The woman hesitated, just long enough. That pause told him everything. She said the maid never complained, never asked for days off, never requested more pay. She said the maid sent money home every month without fail. Almost all of it. Home. That word landed heavy. He asked where home was. The woman answered carefully. A small village far from the city. A place with no hospitals worth naming. The Mafia boss listened. Silent. Still, the woman continued. The maid had a mother. Sick for years. Medicine expensive. Treatment uncertain. There was also a younger brother. Too young to work. Too old to be carried. Smart. Quiet. Always hungry for books. The maid worked here because it was safer than other places. Because the pay came on time. Because no one touched her. She chose hunger over risk. That was the part that tightened his chest. He dismissed the woman with a nod. No reaction. No comment. Later he stood alone in his office. The walls thick. The windows reinforced. The city distant. He stared at the table where maps and weapons once lay, and thought about choice. This was not laziness. This was not weakness. This was sacrifice. She was shrinking herself to keep others alive. That afternoon he watched again. From behind glass. From corners that reflected nothing. The maid moved slower than before. Fatigue weighed her down. But she did not stop. When the staff meal arrived, she waited again. Others ate, talked quietly, left crumbs. She returned to work. He saw it clearly now. She was not refusing food. She was protecting it for someone else. That realization hit harder than any betrayal ever had. Because betrayal was expected. This was not. In his world, loyalty was demanded. Purchase, enforce. But this was loyalty chosen. The memory returned again. Himself at her age. Sending money he did not have. Skipping meals. Pretending hunger was temporary. He had sworn then. If he ever had power, no one under his protection would live like that. Somewhere along the way, he had broken that promise. The evening meal was prepared. Lavish, excessive. He sat alone, pushed food around the plate, did not eat. All he could see was her crouched body, her shaking hands, her silence. Power suddenly felt heavy, not because it demanded violence, but because it demanded responsibility. He realized something then. If fear had taught her to disappear, then safety had to teach her to exist. And that could not come from charity. Charity embarrassed. It had to come from structure. Lo, he stood, left the room untouched. That night he did not sleep again. But this time, the decision was no longer forming. It was already made. The morning did not announce what was coming. It arrived like any other. Quiet, ordered, predictable. Yet the house felt it. Staff sensed a shift before any word was spoken. Movements slowed. Eyes lowered further. Breaths shortened. When the Mafia boss entered the main hall, he did not go to his study. He did not make a call. He did not isolate himself. He walked toward the dining room. That alone unsettled everyone. Messages traveled without sound. People gathered not because they were summoned loudly, but because silence demanded it. They stood in a loose line. Men and women who had learned to survive by obedience. Hands folded, spines straight, faces blank. The maid stood at the far end, almost hidden, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her gaze fixed on the floor. She believed this was her end. The Mafia boss stood at the head of the long table. He did not raise his voice. He never did. He looked at them slowly. Each face, each posture. Then he spoke. From this day forward, all meals will be taken here. At this table, no separation, no waiting, no exceptions. The words fell heavy. Simple, final, no explanation followed. Silence stretched. Thick, dangerous. Someone swallowed audibly. Someone shifted weight. No one spoke. The maid froze. Her mind raced. Rules changed only for punishment. A change meant consequence. As she felt the room tilt, the Mafia boss continued. Food is prepared for the house, not for rank, not for position. Anyone under this roof eats. Anyone under this roof sits. That is the rule. He turned and sat. The effect was immediate. Chairs scraped softly. Not all at once. Hesitant, uncertain. No one moved until he lifted his hand once. Not sharply, not forcefully, just enough. The staff began to sit. The maid did not. She stood frozen, heart pounding, waiting for permission that had never existed before. The Mafia boss noticed, not with anger, but with understanding. He looked at her, just once, a single nod. Her legs shook as she moved. Every step felt wrong, illegal, too loud. She reached the table and sat at the edge, hands folded in her lap, eyes still down. Plates were placed in front of everyone. The same portions, the same food. Steam rose, warm, inviting. No one ate. They waited. The Mafia boss picked up his fork, took a bite, chewed slowly. Only then did others begin. The sound of eating filled the room. Soft, uncertain. A human. The maid stared at her plate. Food she was not supposed to touch. Food that had once belonged to someone else. She lifted her fork slowly, paused, then took the smallest bite possible. Nothing happened. No shout, no punishment, no sudden violence. Just silence. Her shoulders loosened slightly. Breathing eased. Around her people ate. Not hurried. Not fearful. The Mafia boss stayed seated. Longer than ever before. He did not speak. He did not leave early. He watched, not to control, but to ensure. This was not kindness offered. It was dignity enforced. By law, by power. When the meal ended, no one rushed away. Chairs stayed longer. Conversations almost began. Almost. The maid stood slowly, unsure what came next. Nothing did. She returned to her duties. But something was different. She walked taller. Barely, but enough. From that day forward, no one hid to eat. Because in a house ruled by fear, the strongest change does not come from softness. It comes from authority choosing protection. And something fragile that had lived in the shadows took its first breath in the light. The change did not announce itself loudly. It crept through the house the way warmth moves through stone. Slow, careful, almost afraid to stay. At the next meal, the staff returned to the dining room without being called. No one rushed. No one joked. They moved as if the floor might shift beneath them. The maid arrived last. She paused at the doorway. hands clenched, heart racing. This time she did not look for a corner. She walked to the table. Her steps were small, measured, but they did not turn back. She sat. The chair did not feel like it belonged to her. Not yet. Her back stayed straight. Her hands folded tight in her lap. The plate placed in front of her was full. Not smaller. Not left over. She stared at it as if it might vanish. The Mafia boss entered moments later. He took his seat without looking around, without checking who was present. That told everyone everything. He did not need to watch anymore. The rule was already alive. They waited again. Out of habit, out of fear. Then he began to eat. The sound of cutlery followed. Soft, uneven. For the first time in years, the dining room did not feel like a checkpoint. It felt like a room. The maid lifted her fork. Her hand trembled less this time. She took a bite, then another. Her breathing slowed. Nothing bad happened. Across the table someone spoke quietly. A comment about the weather. Another about the bread. The words fell awkwardly, like something long forgotten. No one stopped them. The Mafia boss did not look up. But he did not leave either. That was new. Days passed. Meals continued. The maid began to sit sooner. Her shoulders loosened. Her eyes lifted occasionally. She ate without rushing, without fear. The staff noticed. They spoke more. Not loudly, not freely, but honestly. Small stories emerged. A sick parent, a long commute, a favorite dish. The house absorbed these sounds differently. It did not reject them. The Mafia boss stayed longer at the table each day. He listened without appearing to. He noticed patterns. Who left? Who stayed quiet? Who ate slowly? He began to understand something he had never needed before. Fear kept people obedient, but safety made them real. One evening the maid laughed. It was brief, soft, almost accidental. She stopped herself immediately, eyes widening, waiting. The Mafia boss looked up. For a moment the room froze. Then he returned to his meal. The laughter stayed. That sound did more damage to the old order than any gun ever had. Because it meant survival was turning into living. The maid began to sleep better. The dark circles beneath her eyes faded slightly. Her steps grew steadier. She no longer flinched at dropped objects. She no longer hid food in napkins. She existed. The Mafia boss noticed how the house felt different at night. Less hollow, less sharp. The silence was no longer heavy. It rested instead of pressed. He realized something quietly. Fear could build an empire, but it could not sustain a home. This change did not make him weaker. It made him more precise. He still ruled, still controlled, still commanded. But now his authority had weight beyond fear. One night, as the maid cleared the table, she hesitated, then spoke. A simple thank you. Not loud, not emotional, just honest. He nodded once. Nothing more was needed. The fragile thing that had once hidden to survive was learning how to stand. And in a world built to crush weakness, that was the most dangerous transformation of all. The summons came without warning. A message delivered quietly. A single request. The maid was to report to the private study. Her hands went cold. This room was not meant for her. It was where decisions were made, where men left changed, or not at all. She walked the corridor slowly, each step heavy, her mind filled with every possible mistake, every silent rule she might have broken. The door opened before she could knock. The Mafia boss stood near the window. Back turned. City spread below like a map of power. He did not look at her right away. As she stood still, waiting, breathing carefully. The room felt different from the rest of the house. Less sharp, more controlled, as if even danger rested here. He gestured to the chair across the desk. She hesitated, then sat, hands folded tight in her lap. The silence stretched, long enough to make her heart race. Finally he turned. His face was calm, unreadable. He placed a folder on the desk, then another. He pushed them toward her. She did not touch them. You may open them, he said. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the first folder. Inside were documents she did not understand at first. Names, numbers, stamps. Then she saw it. Her mother. A hospital name. Treatment schedules. Costs already covered. Her breath caught. She opened the second folder. Her brother's name. A school. Books. Tuition paid. She stared, unable to process. Tears blurred the page. She tried to speak. Could not. The Mafia boss watched her quietly. He did not interrupt. He did not rush. When she finally looked up, her face was broken open. Jacques, gratitude. Avir, why? She whispered. He did not answer immediately. Because silence had already done enough harm. He said. She shook her head, tears falling freely now. I did nothing. She said. You did everything. He replied. You carried what should not have been yours. You survived quietly. That ends now. She covered her mouth, trying to contain the sound of her crying. Ashamed, overwhelmed. This is not charity. He continued. This is correction. She did not understand. He leaned forward slightly. No one under my roof will disappear to keep others alive. Not again. The words struck deeper than the gift. Again, she sensed something beneath them. Something old, unhealed. She nodded, unable to speak. There is more, he said. Protection, medical access, safe travel. Your family is untouchable. The final word landed heavy. Untouchable. In his world that meant everything. She stood slowly, emotion shaking her body. Thank you, she said. It was not enough, but it was all she had. He nodded once. You may go. She left the room changed. Not because her life was saved, but because someone with power had finally seen her. Behind the closed door, the Mafia boss remained still. The past pressed close. A memory of another woman. Another kitchen. Another hidden meal. He had been too late then. This time, he was not. The truth did not come out of the past easily. It surfaced slowly, reluctant, like something dragged up from deep water. That night the Mafia boss sat alone in the study. The folders gone. The desk empty. The city lights blinking below without meaning. He poured a drink. Let it sit untouched. The image of the maid crying replayed again and again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of quiet pain that leaves marks. It broke something open inside him. Something he had sealed long before this house ever existed. He stood and walked to the far wall, to the only drawer in the mansion that remained locked. Not for security, but for memory. He opened it. Inside was nothing valuable by anyone else's measure. An old photograph, edges worn. A woman standing in a small kitchen. Her smile tired. Her eyes kind. His mother. She had once worked in a house like this. Not this mansion, but one just as cold. Just as powerful. She had cleaned floors that never stayed clean. Cooked food she never tasted. Learned rules that were never explained. As a child, he remembered waking up early, watching her eat standing up. Quickly, quietly, she told him it was habit. That sitting made her slow. That was a lie. Years later, after the power, after the blood, after the empire, he learned the truth. She used to hide to eat. Behind counters. In corners. With leftovers meant for no one. She never complained. Never asked. Never took what was offered. And one night, she collapsed. Hunger does not kill loudly. It weakens. It waits. By the time anyone noticed, it was too late. The Mafia boss closed his eyes. He had been young, powerless, angry. He had sworn then. No one under his protection would ever live unseen. That no one would shrink themselves to survive. And yet, here he was, years later, watching history repeat itself in his own house. The maid had not just reminded him of the past. She was the past. That was the truth he had not spoken. Not even to himself. This was never about generosity. Never about kindness. It was about failure. And the chance to undo it. He returned the photograph to the drawer. Locked it carefully. Not to hide it, but to respect it. The next morning he ordered changes beyond the house. Quiet orders. Executed without explanation. Funds redirected. Clinics protected. Food routes established. Shelters supplied. All anonymous. He did not want his name attached. Names turned help into debt. This was not a favor. It was responsibility. The maid noticed the changes slowly. Not just in her life, but in the world outside the walls. Food reaching places it never had. Medical doors opening without bribes. Children eating without fear. She did not know why. She did not need to. The Mafia boss watched from a distance. Not with pride, but with resolve. The ghost of his mother no longer felt accusing. It felt acknowledged. He had not saved her, but he could save the pattern she died inside. That was the real power. Not ruling fear, but breaking cycles. And the most shocking truth of all was that the man feared by cities had been ruled his entire life by the memory of a woman who once hid to eat. Until now, time changed the house in ways no one expected. Not quickly, not loudly, but completely. The mansion still stood guarded, still watched, still feared from the outside. Yet inside it breathed differently. Meals became anchors in the day. Not checkpoints. Not obligations. The long table was no longer empty. No longer cold. People sat without waiting for permission. They spoke softly. They stayed longer. The maid no longer arrived last. She walked in with steady steps. Head lifted, hands relaxed. She ate without counting bites, without watching the door. Her laughter returned. Not the careful kind, but real. The Mafia boss watched all of this without comment. He still ruled, still decided who lived and who disappeared. But his presence had shifted. Fear no longer followed him into every room. Respect did. Staff worked harder, not because they were afraid, but because they were protected. Mistakes were corrected, not punished. Silence still existed, but it was no longer sharp. It rested. Outside the house, changes spread quietly. Clinics stayed open. Shelves stayed full. Routes remained safe. No speeches. No credit. Just results. The maid's mother recovered slowly. Strength returning in small pieces. Her brother attended school every morning. Books under his arm. food in his stomach. The maid visited them without fear, without debt hanging over her head. She returned to the house different, not owned, not dependent, a chosen. One evening, the Mafia boss sat at the table long after the meal ended. The staff lingered too. No one rushed away. The maid served tea, then surprised herself by sitting across from him. No one stopped her. The light from the windows softened the room. For the first time, the mansion felt like shelter, not power. The Mafia boss looked around, at faces no longer hiding, at people no longer shrinking, and understood something fully. This was his legacy, not the territory, not the fear, but the moment someone no longer had to hide to survive. He remembered the kitchen corner, the shaking hands, the sound that should not have existed. That sound had rewritten his empire. The maid met his eyes briefly, a silent understanding passing between them. She did not thank him again. She did not nod too. The house no longer feared silence, because silence was no longer dangerous. It had been replaced with dignity. And in a world ruled by violence, that was the most powerful thing he had ever built. The end.